I scare pretty easily. It's not quite pathetic, but my wife is always laughing at me for it. Such as whenever the music in some scary movie crescendos and there's obviously a jump scare coming up, but I jump anyway. Despite this, I'm drawn like a magnet to scary stories and movies, and I've never been able to turn down great storytelling even if it means I'll have a few nightmares. Unfortunately for my 5-year-old daughter, she's got the same overactive imagination I do, and scares pretty easy too. Between the two of us, my wife keeps busy with jumping out of dark hiding spots or closets and pretending to be deep, disembodied voices lurking in the darkened hallway. A situation made worse by our recent decision to move and there being a surplus of boxes and objects to hide behind. I've become immune to her shenanigans and can spot the eerie silence when she's hiding or her not too subtle position behind the shower curtain in the bathroom that's slightly pushed back where no windows or a single night light provide illumination. With my daughter, she's another story. She becomes scared when she suddenly disappears down the unlit hallway and calls to her in a dark, menacing voice. Abby knows she's going to jump and frighten her. She also knows she'll persist calling until she goes, so I often get wrangled into being her escort on such perilous quests. I don't know. Maybe some part of her loves the drama. I always just roll my eyes at her girlish antics. Until the other day. Abby had grown tall enough to reach things on the countertops, and now she had graduated climbing to access the cabinets above by using her stool. Quite clever, really. What it amounted to, though, is that no matter where we hid the cookies and chips, she was always finding them. Abby would very often eat hardly anything for dinner, then sneak into the kitchen at night. This went on for weeks after her most recent growth spurt and was incredibly frustrating. My wife decided to use her best weapon. Terror. She sat her down on the couch, getting on her level, and told her the story of the Cookie Monster while I stood off to the side listening. This was the beloved character from Sesame Street who was obsessed with consuming cookies with some distant relation whom that beloved character had been based on. One made kid-friendly like in a Disney film. The Cookie Monster hoarded all things sugary and sweet, all things crunchy and salty. A nocturnal creature, only at night could it awake to protect its hoard like a dragon covets its gold, confronting those who would take what belonged to it. My daughter didn't know what covets meant, but she got the picture well enough. She looked skeptical at first, her blue eyes narrowing as she held her gaze. Yet, I knew it wouldn't take much to push her over the edge. Had she gone too far this time? I felt a hesitation at allowing her to take this behavior so far, but didn't have a successful alternative to her midnight snacking. She looked at me then and saw that fear in my eyes, hesitation and unwillingness to share this information. Interpreting it as something meant to precaution her, and her entire demeanor changed. With wide, stricken eyes, she said, "What if he catches you?" "Well," my wife began, in her most earnest voice, "if he catches you, then you'll become an addition to his midnight snack." She smiled and added with a deeper voice. She looks rather mannish. "And he's partial to little girls. Do you remember the sweet little girl across the street that he used to play with? Got her." Abby jerked back, surprised to hear such news. "But Mommy said her family moved." Her tone making it clear that she'd drawn a connection between our moving boxes and her former friend's situation. They did it, after her sudden disappearance. That's why I didn't see her at all those last few days before her family left. She glanced up at me momentarily to make sure I wasn't going to say otherwise, and I glared at her over her head. Her father told me about it. Like you, Katie enjoyed late-night snacks, even when her parents told her not to. Until one night, her mother woke up feeling thirsty and decided to get a glass of water from the kitchen. As she crossed the living room, she began to hear these awful crunching sounds, but it didn't sound like normal sounds. It sounded like something much larger than even a carrot, and wet. She slowed down and tiptoed to the kitchen entrance, only to see a black, hulking shadow over the still form of her daughter. Horrified, she passed out, and her husband found her the next morning. Their daughter, however, was gone, and they never saw her again. She was done for. Abby stared at her wide, accepting eyes, and her mouth hung open, like the hinges on her jaw had been broken. To our relief, we didn't hear the telltale sound of thin plastic packaging whenever she was supposed to be in bed a single night after that. My wife and I usually stay up later than her, especially on the weekends. We were no stranger to midnight runs to the kitchen ourselves. Last night, I went to the kitchen to grab a snack, checking on my girl along the way, and hearing her soft snoring. I stepped into the pool of light surrounding my stove and reached into the cupboard above, foraging around for a package of animal crackers. The scraping of heavy objects and the crinkling of plastic was loud in the peacefulness of the night. I hesitated, listening for any movement. I hesitated, listening for any movement. My eyes darted around the room. Shadows leading in the hall danced as I broke up the primary source of light. Goosebumps trailed along my forearm, where thoughts of the Cookie Monster popped unwanted into my mind. The waiting darkness outside that circle of light suddenly became foreboding. My mind imagined something lurking there, waiting for me to try and leave with those crackers. A pitch-black form began to grow from the shadows. Chuckling at myself, I couldn't help but grab the package and bolted down the ominous hallway to our bedroom, practically jump into the bed, heart pounding in my chest with a burst of breath, feeling like I'd just escaped some great danger. My wife gave me a strange look, but then I just shrugged my shoulders, knowing she'd put it off as my quirkiness. However, mischievous glee entered her, caused me to jump into bed like that, like a kid being chased by monsters. Her Cookie Monster. Grinning, she declared that she too needed a little something for her stomach, and I watched from our bed as she traipsed? Who says that? Down the hall, and disappeared around the corner into the kitchen. I almost called her back in a panic, afraid for what she might encounter. I held my tongue even as my chest tightened, making it difficult to breathe. That's when I heard it, the loud crinkling of plastic and the sound of somebody eating something very crunchy, very noisily. "Me want cookies!" She exclaimed through a full mouth. I rolled my eyes back in exasperation and would have missed the darkness flit down the hallway if I hadn't been angled toward the door. A nightlight was often left on in the bathroom for my daughter to find her way. As it passed by, the light momentarily winked out, marking its progress in the direction of the small light from the kitchen. "Jennifer!" I cried out. That was her name. The obnoxious crunching noises stopped. I heard the impact of the chip bag hitting the floor along with a muffled expletive from my wife. What followed were some of the most sickening sounds I've ever heard, accompanied by a brief whimpering from Jennifer. My body froze where I sat, unable to move. I prayed Abby didn't hear anything unusual, and I went up to investigate. Then nothing. Just the stillness of the house. That was several hours ago. The house has been strangely serene since. I've been able to move from my position on the bed. I couldn't sleep. I've been listening to the soft murmuring of my sleeping daughter, waiting for the gray light of morning to come so I can collect her and let her know that my wife is gone. Okay. Well, that was a story, I guess. I don't know, it was alright. Nothing special. You know, it was a story. I mean, obviously, you knew exactly what was going to happen throughout that story, so it's kind of like, what exactly are you listening to it for? But other than that, it was well written. I'm going to give that like a 6 out of 10. Well written, otherwise kind of pointless. Some funny lines. Also, it was about a woman's husband, but I changed it because I don't know, that would be odd otherwise. But it didn't really make that much of a difference. It just made it harder for me to read, really. I don't know why I made the wife named Jennifer. I mean, I couldn't have named her anything, but I picked Jennifer. I should have picked a better name. I mean, I don't know. Very generic. But then she picked the name David, this author. Assuming it's a she, I really have no idea. Anyway,